Jacksonville.
And thank you for joining us this morning. United States Senator Marco Rubio is with us, as we talked about. And I'd like to kind of get right at your efforts here when it comes to what we're calling red flag legislation. This is something that you've introduced and certainly is getting a lot of attention after these mass shootings in El Paso and in Dayton. And it seems like you named the week, and we've got another example of this. Tell us about your efforts there and how it makes
Let me tell you first why. The one thing we know that all of these mass shootings have in common, and frankly have in common with the leading cause of gun death in America, which is suicide, has it in common with that as well, is before they take action, whether it's killing themselves or hurting other people, there have been clear signs that this person was about to do something. We're learning more and more every day about the shooter in Dayton having clear signs. We now are well aware of the signs that existed with the killer in Parkland. The problem is that even if you know this, unless it's a crime, there's nothing you can do about it in many cases. And so what this does is it provides a federal program that incentivizes states. It's not a federal law in the sense that it requires anything, but it gives money to states to incentivize them to establish red flag laws that meet minimum criteria on things that are important, like due process and so forth. But incentivizes them so that now if a family member, it has to be either a family member or law enforcement, has reason to believe that someone is a danger to themselves or others, they can go before a judge and make that argument. These are not permanent. There's a preliminary process, and then within 14 days you have to get the longer term one, and the longer term one is only for a year, which means you have to come back every year before a judge and make the exact same case. So it's not much different than restraining orders or the Baker Act here in Florida. You can use the court system to keep someone from hurting other people if you can prove in court. And we make it, one of the requirements we have is that it become a criminal offense to falsely accuse someone. In Florida, since this law has been passed, it's been used about 1,000 times, and a significant percentage of them, the judge didn't grant the permanent law because it didn't meet the right standard. So as I said, I mean, no law is perfect, but with the right due process, it's an additional tool to keep these from happening again and keep people from committing suicide as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things there. One was the Baker Act. I think that's something that people in Florida say, how effective is it? The other is, civil protection orders. There's lots of criticism about whether or not that makes a difference. Is your view that, yeah, but at least, as you mentioned, no law is perfect, at least it takes a step toward preventing these things?
Look, ultimately, the law is only as good as your ability to enforce it. I could argue to you today that the killer in Parkland should have been charged with a crime, or somebody should have done something about it long before he killed all these people. The sheriff knew how dangerous he was. The school district knew it. People called in the FBI hotline, and it was never relayed. So this person was a danger, and nothing happened. So it's only as good as your willingness to enforce it. But imagine for a moment if you believe that someone you're close to, a family member or someone you live with, or it's law enforcement, knows someone isn't just dangerous. They're about to commit an act. You have no legal tools that if they haven't committed a crime, there's nothing you can do to stop them until they act. And so this is one potential tool that could be used. I'm not saying it would prevent everything, but it's certainly more effective than some of the other things that are being discussed.
Yeah, I had read that after what happened in El Paso and Dayton on that weekend, you said, I'm ready to go back to Washington right now if we could vote on this.
Yeah, people say go back to Washington. Well, that's not up to us. I mean, that's a decision that's been made by the majority leader and the speaker to call us back into session. But whether it's now or in September, I think there's some momentum to get something done that's effective, that works. And this law is a direct result. I mean, I filed this law a year ago. Over a year and a half ago. I filed it in January at the beginning of the new Congress. So this is something I've been working on for some time. Ironically enough, had just finished meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago with a number of the parents from Parkland who were up there to visit and talk about this with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Graham, and others. So, we'll see what we can get done here.
Yeah. Does all of this, for you at least, come out of that tragedy that we saw in Parkland a year and a half ago?
Yes, because what I did when that happened is I said, okay, what could have been done to prevent this? There's a lot of ideas out there, but background check would not have prevented Parkland. It wouldn't have prevented Dayton, and it wouldn't have prevented what happened in El Paso or virtually any of these other shootings. These people either passed background checks or would have. Neither would the weapons bans that they're talking about, because that law largely bans guns on what it looks like, not what it actually does. But this could have. Again, assuming that somebody would have enforced the law. It would have required the sheriff's office to do something. It would have required the school district or his parents to do something. But nonetheless, it's a tool that's available to people. And something that I think is worth exploring and incentivizing states to do. Florida already has one.
Senator, is this a partisan issue? It certainly gets cast that way at times, that it's either conservative, you're on this side, or if you're liberal on that side.
No, look, I'm a gun owner. I have a concealed weapons permit myself, and I believe strongly in the Second Amendment. And by the way, It's the law. It's the Constitution. There is a constitutional right to bear arms. Like any constitutional right, we do put some restrictions on it. They exist now. Background checks exist right now. But if you're going to put a restriction on a right, it should be limited and it should be effective. And so I think there are people on the left, frankly, that don't believe in the Second Amendment, that want to violate it, that want to test how far they can go. That's not my view. My view of it is that I am in favor of anything that will protect the right of law-abiding people to protect themselves and their families, but keep guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals and mass killers, for example. And so we're always looking for something that would work that doesn't violate the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, I know it's a slightly different topic here, but later on we're going to be talking to the FSCJ president. I know Senator Scott was in Jacksonville talking about this issue. Tell me your thoughts on being able to help students as they come through that higher education process and then walk out with loads of debt. This is something you're working on as well.
Well, it's something I went through. I had over $100,000 in student loans when I finished law school and college. And so we've got a couple of ideas, and the one that I'm excited about is one of the things that drives, in addition to alternatives to traditional learning, how can we get people credit for what they already know? I just left a group of veterans that I was visiting with, and these are people that in the service of our country have learned a lot of things, but then have to sit in a classroom and be lectured about something they already know. Sometimes they're more qualified than the professor. But the other thing is, when you look at student loans, what really drives up the burden is the interest compounding. And so one of the things we've put out there is, what if we got rid of interest on student loans and instead charged a flat fee that doesn't compound? So it's the principal on the loan plus some flat fee that pays for the loan, that pays for the processing and the handling of the loan and all the servicing that goes into it, but doesn't compound. The reason why interest compounds in the private sector for a loan is because banks are in the business of making money. Sure. The federal government's not in the business of making money off of student loans. And if you look at what that would mean, we could charge a fee that's embedded into the principal of the mortgage, of the loan, but it doesn't grow. It doesn't continue to compound over the years, so your student debt doesn't continue to go up. And as part of that, we would also make income-based repayment automatic, so that your monthly payment would be based on how much money you make. Again, that would help. But I'm very sensitive to this issue, both as someone who owed a lot of money and had to face, what that meant, and as the father of students myself. And so I know it's something that's a big deal to a lot of people.
Yeah, and there are lots of ideas out there, and especially as we head towards 2020 and election, lots of different notions about how to handle this. But I'm with you, Senator. 3 kids, all in college right now. That's the justice way, and we're looking for a way to make sure that the kids don't get crushed.